our presenters, and Kevin is gonna take over for this first part for us. Kevin.
All right, thanks, Tim. I hope everyone can see my screen now. So before I get into some of the value and what data virtualization is, I first want to just go over some of the different challenges that we're seeing across many different enterprises and organizations that we work with. So it really starts with the growth and the amount of data that's getting created every day and every second. And then additionally, all the new technologies that are getting introduced, right? So we have all this big initiatives to move to the cloud. There's Snowflake, Teradata, all these things out there that everyone's trying to move all their old legacy or even existing data sets over to these cloud databases so that we can be more efficient and more cost effective. So with that being said, I'm going to paint a picture looking all the way back from organizations that have been around for the past 50 years. You probably have mainframe systems. You probably have implemented an SAP ERP, an Oracle ERP, or something along those lines. And then you've moved to, let's create a data warehouse so that we can really see, provide our data analytics teams better insights into that data and start, optimizing queries and things like that. And then you're getting into now today we have Kafka and Pulsar and all these different real-time technologies that we're trying to get access to your e-commerce data when people are making transactions in real time or for financial institutions, different event-driven type architectures. So we have all these underlying data sources now that are tangled all together in different ways, and we're connecting them in different ways. Now, our analytics teams or different operational users across the business want access to this data. So what they're having to do is maybe go to that data warehouse and pull out your customer data. If they're looking for maybe a use case where you want to predict the customer spend for North America, you might have to also look at some of this, or maybe real-time data, or maybe you're also having to pull data from your master data management platform to get that accurate set of customer records. And then now you have half your data in Snowflake too, because you started transitioning that migration to the cloud. We have only moved maybe half that data because we all know that mainframe data is still going to be sitting there. So what we're going to be talking about today is a solution that can help you access all these different data sources from one platform in an effective way, and then be able to provision that data to the right users at the right time. So let me go to this next slide. So before we get into a little bit more of the actual technology, again, so as I just mentioned, you have all these underlying data sources that are all over the place. You might be performing ETL processes through them and having to create different batch processes from various different systems to one another, which that's okay, and that's going to sit there. But what we can also do is be able to access this data that's being created in real time with the data that's stagnant, and from one single access point within data virtualization that will kind of sit in between your different consumers that you see on the top of the screen, where you see maybe self-service analytics, business intelligence, transactional applications. All these consumers say WebFOCUS. If you're a WebFOCUS user, maybe you have Power BI somewhere else within the organization. Maybe you have Spotfire or Tableau. We can then connect to all these different endpoints through this unified view when we've already created different joins from all these different data sources. So what you're doing is really reducing replication costs. This is all a virtualized technology. So we're not actually creating another copy of the data, which is also, it costs more money for more storage, and then also creates more confusion if you have more copies of your customers throughout your different data sources. We're able to virtualize this different view and allow your users to join the data in the way they see appropriate, and then you can reuse that. So the reason I brought up, the different BI tools is so maybe you have a really good query that you've created within this virtualized view that then can be accessed from all these different consumer endpoints. So the last kind of recap that I really want to put this together with is this overall. It's more like an architectural type diagram, but what it is doing is it's discussing. If you remember, as I talked about all those different data sources, we've kind of put them on the left side of the screen. So now within data virtualization, one of the really key drivers is all these connectors it comes with. So there's 350 plus connectors that we leverage. And what a connector does is it allows you to basically normalize the data. Maybe you have like an SAP system that it's coded in some proprietary, I think, ABAP language where you can't really access that data, or you can't access it in a readable way. You might have a HANA database that is, it's more columnar than relational. Also with like XML messages, maybe you have a file directory. You're able to use these connectors to connect to any type of data source. Essentially, if we can't connect to it, we'll find a way to connect to it. And then you can normalize it in the same sense. So basically putting XML, you can transition that into SQL or vice versa, and then combine this data together in a way that you can actually make sense of it into a business-oriented type view. But going back to the connectors, what the connectors do is really just allow you to enter in maybe like system properties, and then you have access to any table that you want in there. And it allows these IT teams to have a lot more effective way, an efficient way to meet demands of the business. So if the business is asking, if a particular business unit needs access to a different ERP system that they currently don't have access to, we can now provision that through this data virtualization platform, looking in one source. So they don't have to repeat this process over and over again for different users. Once we've connected to it, the provisioning process is much more seamless. So kind of going along this thought process, right, talking about combine and transform. So as I mentioned, you can not only just like union the data together, but we can also create calculated columns, and maybe you're adding up the different, I'll keep going down the use case I talked about earlier. You're adding up the annual spend of customers. We can calculate this within data virtualization, and then now reuse that over and over again within these consuming applications. So the next part is the optimization and caching mechanisms, right? So this utilizes a parallel processing engine, which allows you to access this data in a much more efficient way than some other, different solutions. And again, it's all virtualized, so we're not replicating it again. But what we can do is we can enable a caching mechanism to be able to access the data in an even more quick way, I'll say, than if you were to look directly down to the source. So what this kind of is doing is, if you have more stagnant data that you're not really changing over time that often, it kind of speeds up the query. So we're giving you lots of different options as to how to make your queries much more optimized than having maybe just a BI tool looking directly down at different sources. Also, you're having the access to real-time data. So we can combine the stagnant data with real-time data to get the most recent view into the data sets that you're looking for. So maybe if you were to be going through as a data analyst within WebFOCUS, and you're having to extract this data out of these data sources into your analytics solution, at that point, then that data is no longer real time, right? It's been the time period since you've extracted it. Then there's a gap between the most recent data. So we're able to, if you're connected to data virtualization, you could, whatever is in that data source at that point in time, unless you cache it, then it wouldn't be, but then we can, you find the right way to weigh those options as to what data is important to you. Lastly, as I mentioned before, you can deliver the data in many different ways. If you want to connect, like I've been using the example, to WebFOCUS. WebFOCUS has an adapter to connect to it. Web services, we can create and expose different web services. If you're a little more technical and know JSON and XML, that can be done as well. Or you can hook up to a messaging queue. There's lots of different use cases and options that we can really dive into. And then to recap the whole thing, this is also a governance solution and a catalog. So once you have all these different data sources and views created, you have different business users come in and request access to them, and it's all provisioned through a user role type assignment. And you can even get down to the field level, start masking different fields and allowing users to only be able to access particular fields. And then I guess you see on the right side, there's also a lot of use cases. So I've been kind of going down this maybe customer 360 type use case where you're trying to get a full view into your customer. That's a really common one, but also think about like M&A. If you acquire a new company and they have an ERP system, now we have an adapter that goes to that ERP system. You have access to all that data at that point, and then you can kind of work your way into the migration from there. So a lot more seamless process for an M&A standpoint. Again, I think I could keep going down a lot of use cases, but I think I'm about at my time. So I hope that kind of helped give a little bit of an overview for you guys.
Absolutely, Kevin. Appreciate that. And yeah, again, this is conversations we've had a lot with our clients as well on these things. As we know that there's lots of needs for us from a data perspective to bring this stuff together, maybe in a data warehouse or whatever that may look like. But that's a huge process. It takes a lot of time to do that, and takes a lot of effort to do that. This is definitely it's not a replacement for that at all, but it's just, another avenue that we've seen clients look at for being able to do that in a much more flexible, one application that kind of manages all that. And this is truly, a nice complement to what, we're doing with a lot of our customers doing MDM and data lakes, data warehouses, those types of things that are a little bit more involved. So appreciate that.